In the dense monsoon forests of southern India, a black panther cub no older than 3 weeks trembled beneath a thorny shrub. Her golden eyes were wide with terror and exhaustion. Her mother lay motionless 15 feet away, the victim of illegal hunters who had vanished into the night. The tiny cub had not eaten in nearly 48 hours. Her body temperature was dropping dangerously low, and with each labored breath, her small chest rose and fell more slowly. She was dying, and she knew it. But what she could not know was that the human approaching through the rain-soaked darkness was paralyzed by a decision that would either save her life or become another failure that haunted him forever. Dr. Michael Reed stood frozen in the downpour, his flashlight beam trembling as it illuminated the dying cub. 8 years ago, he had been a brilliant wildlife veterinarian, respected internationally for his work with endangered species. But one impossible choice during an emergency surgery ended the life of the last documented clouded leopard in Bengal, costing him his license, his marriage, and his reputation. Since then, he had sworn never to interfere with nature again, accepting a solitary job as a night patrol ranger where observation was his only duty. Now, as this panther cub's labored breathing filled the silence, that same paralyzing question returned. What if I make the wrong choice again? His hand reached forward, pulled back, then reached again. Every second of hesitation brought her closer to death. And in that moment of agonizing doubt, something inside him finally broke. If you have ever felt that crushing weight of a second chance, that fear of failing someone who depends on you completely, then you will understand every moment of what comes next. This story exists to remind us that sometimes the bravest thing we can do is trust ourselves again, even when the world has told us we are not worthy of that trust. Hit that subscribe button now and join our community dedicated to sharing these powerful stories of redemption, connection, and the unbreakable bonds that can form when two broken souls find each other in the darkness. The rain had been falling for 3 hours when Michael Reed began his patrol that night. It was October 23, 2015, and the monsoon season was in full force across the Nagahole Forest Reserve in Karnataka, southern India. Michael had been working as a night ranger for 6 years, ever since his world had collapsed. The isolation suited him. Out here, there were no colleagues to avoid, no former friends who crossed the street when they saw him coming, no constant reminder of the respect he had lost. That's when he heard it, a sound that didn't belong, thin, weak, barely audible over the rain. He turned toward the sound, pushing through wet undergrowth, and the scene that met his eyes would be seared into his memory forever. An adult black panther lay dead in a small clearing. 3 bullet wounds. Poachers. Then he heard the sound again, and there, pressed against the roots, eyes reflecting back his light like 2 golden coins, was the smallest black panther cub he had ever seen. His training kicked in automatically. He assessed her condition with the practiced eye of a veterinarian. Severe dehydration, hypothermia, possible hypoglycemia. She had perhaps 6 hours left, maybe less. His hand moved toward her, then stopped. The old fear crashed over him like a physical wave. The clouded leopard, the surgery, the failure. His philosophy for 6 years had been crystal clear. Observe, document, never interfere. Let nature decide. But she was dying. This tiny, perfect creature was dying right in front of him. The memories flooded back. The clouded leopard had been brought to the Bengal Conservation Center pregnant and injured. He had 2 choices: a safe surgery that would save the mother but sacrifice the unborn cubs, or a risky procedure that might save everyone. He chose risk. He chose hope. And he failed. The mother died on the table. The cubs died moments later. The investigation concluded that his decision had been driven by personal ambition rather than sound medical judgment. They took his license, his reputation, everything. His wife Lisa tried to understand, but the public scrutiny was too much. The divorce was quiet, sad, inevitable. But now this cub was dying because of humans, because of poachers, because of murder, not because of nature.
What if I don't try, he thought. What if I walk away and she dies here, alone, cold, terrified, because I was too afraid to act? The cub's eyes met his, and in that moment Michael saw something that shattered the last of his paralysis. Just a tiny creature, clinging to life with everything she had, asking nothing except for a chance. His decision was made. He gently scooped her into his arms, tucking her inside his waterproof jacket against his chest. "Stay with me," he whispered. "Just stay with me." The first 72 hours were hell. Michael barely slept. Every 2 hours, he fed the cub with a bottle he had fashioned from a syringe and rubber tubing. Between feedings, he obsessively monitored her temperature, her breathing rate, her heart rate. He weighed her 3 times daily. 3 pounds 2 ounces on day 1, 3 pounds 7 ounces on day 3. She was gaining. She was fighting. On the 4th night, something changed. The cub finished her bottle and looked up at Michael with those golden eyes, fully alert for the first time. Then she began to purr. The smallest sound, but unmistakably a purr of contentment. Michael felt tears stream down his face. She was going to make it. He named her Shadow. As weeks passed, Shadow grew stronger. At 6 weeks old, she began exploring the cabin, stalking his boots with exaggerated focus before pouncing and tumbling over herself. Michael found himself laughing, actually laughing, for the first time in years. But with every moment of joy came waves of anxiety. At 8 weeks, Shadow developed a slight fever. Michael didn't sleep for 48 hours straight, certain he was losing her. But the fever broke, and Shadow bounced back. At 12 weeks, Shadow did something Michael hadn't anticipated. She began following him everywhere. When he went outside, she would cry at the door until he let her come along. When he slept, she would climb onto the bed and press herself against his chest, purring. Michael tried to discourage it. He knew the day would come when she would need to return to the wild, but Shadow had made her choice. She had chosen him. When Michael resumed his night patrols at the 6-month mark, he tried leaving Shadow in the cabin. She destroyed the place, howling so loudly he could hear her half a mile into the forest. Finally, he gave up. They would patrol together. Shadow fell into step 3 paces behind him. Not beside him, but behind. Like a shadow. Two years became 3. 3 became 4. Shadow was now a full adult, 143 pounds of apex predator. She ruled the eastern section of the reserve. But every night, without fail, she came to walk with Michael. The transformation in Michael was equally profound. Shadow gave him purpose. She was proof that he could make the right choice. Every day she survived was evidence that he hadn't failed, that he could trust his own judgment. He began writing letters to Anna, his daughter. Short at first, then gradually sharing more. Anna wrote back, cautious but not cold. She was completing her degree in conservation biology now. The letters were a lifeline Michael hadn't known he needed. Local villagers who lived near the reserve began calling him Shadow Walker. The name stuck. It was better than the other names he had been called. Failure, disgrace. The veterinarian who killed the last clouded leopard. At 5 years, something shifted. Shadow began spending some nights away from the cabin. He knew what it meant. She was establishing her own territory, living the life a panther should live. But every time she returned, every time she touched her nose to his hand, their private signal, he felt relief so profound it was almost painful. Then came the sounds on a Wednesday night in early March. Deep, resonant roars that echoed through the forest. Male panther. Territorial calls. Shadow heard them too. Her entire body went rigid, and for the first time in 6 years, she hesitated before following him on patrol.
Over the next 2 weeks, the male's presence became impossible to ignore. Shadow's behavior changed. Some nights she wouldn't show up for patrol until hours after sunset. Other nights, she would stick so close to Michael she was practically walking on his heels, as if fighting against her own instincts to leave. Michael watched it all with a growing sense of dread. Shadow was 6 years old. She was in her prime. She should mate. She should have cubs. She should live a full panther life, not spend her nights walking patrol with a human who had become far too attached to her. One night, lying awake with Shadow curled against him, Michael had the realization that nearly stopped his heart. She would stay not because she wanted to, but because she felt obligated. She would stay out of loyalty, and in doing so, she would never have cubs, never fulfill her biological purpose, never truly live as a panther should. He was doing to her exactly what he had failed to do for the clouded leopard, putting his own needs above what was right for her. Michael made his decision that night. It was the hardest decision he had ever made, because this one would hurt him far more than any failure could. He would force her to leave. The next evening, as sunset approached, and Shadow waited by the cabin door for patrol, Michael did not go outside. He sat inside, lights off, door closed. He listened to her soft chuffing sounds, her confusion evident. She waited. Michael sat on the floor, his back against the door, hand pressed against the wood. On the other side, just inches away, Shadow waited for him. He could hear her breathing. Tears streamed down his face. Every instinct screamed at him to open that door. But he had learned something in 8 years of exile. Love was not about holding on. Love was about knowing when to let go, even when it destroyed you. Forgive me. I love you too much to keep you. The second night was worse. Shadow scratched at the door, gently at first, then more insistently. Not aggressively, never that, just confused, worried. Third night, fourth night, fifth night, the routine was the same. On the sixth night, Shadow didn't come. Michael waited, listening, but the forest remained silent. She was gone. Michael sat on the cabin steps and wept. He had done it. He had successfully driven her away. He had made the right choice, and it felt like the worst thing he had ever done. 3 months passed. Michael went through the motions: patrol, report, sleep, repeat. But the forest felt dead without Shadow. In the 4th month, Michael began seeing new tracks, small prints alongside Shadow's larger ones. Cubs. She had given birth. He felt a smile cross his face for the first time in months. He had made the right choice. Then, in the 5th month, disaster struck. Michael was crossing a steep ravine when the rain-soaked ground gave way beneath his feet. He fell 12 feet, landing hard. His ankle was broken. He was alone in a remote section of the reserve. Night was falling, and in the distance he could hear the coughing grunts of a hyena pack. He tried to crawl. The hyenas moved closer. 4 of them, 6. They were circling, testing. This was it. This was how it ended. Then he heard it, a roar that made every hair on his body stand up. Shadow. She exploded from the undergrowth, positioning herself between Michael and the hyenas, roaring a warning of pure fury. The hyena scattered in seconds. Shadow turned. Her golden eyes met his. She walked right up to him and touched her nose to his hand. "I am here. I remember. You are still mine, and I am still yours." Behind her, 2 cubs, about 4 months old, emerged from cover. Shadow's cubs, the next generation. Shadow stayed until Michael could fashion a makeshift crutch. She stayed as he struggled to his feet. She stayed as he began the agonizing journey back toward the cabin. And she walked with him, her and her cubs, 3 shadows instead of 1. Michael cried as he walked, but these were not tears of pain. These were tears of understanding. She hadn't stayed away because she stopped caring. She had stayed away because she had her own life now. But when he needed her, truly needed her, she came. By the time Michael reached his cabin, dawn was breaking. Shadow and her cubs stopped at the tree line. Shadow looked at him one last time, her golden eyes full of intelligence and emotion that transcended words. Then she turned and disappeared into the forest. Michael collapsed on his cabin steps, exhausted, injured, but more whole than he had felt in months. He had let her go. She had left. She had lived. And she had chosen to return when he needed her most. He had not failed. He had loved correctly, and that love had come back to him in the moment that mattered. 3 weeks later, Anna arrived at the reserve. That evening they sat on the cabin steps together as sunset turned the sky orange and gold. "Tell me about her," Anna said softly. "Tell me about Shadow." Michael did. He told her everything: the rescue, the growth, the bond, the impossible choice, the separation, and the return. "You saved her twice," Anna said finally. "Once when you picked her up in the rain, and once when you let her go." "She saved me," Michael corrected gently. "She gave me back the one thing I thought I'd lost forever, the ability to trust my own judgment, to know that sometimes the hardest choices are the right ones." As they sat in comfortable silence, 3 pairs of golden eyes appeared at the forest edge, Shadow and her cubs. They didn't approach, they simply watched, present, protective, part of Michael's life even in their separation. "Dad," Anna whispered, staring at the panthers in awe. "They're beautiful." "Yes," Michael agreed, his voice thick with emotion. "They are." Shadow turned and melted back into the forest, her cubs following. But Michael knew she would return. Not every day, not even every week, but when it mattered, when she chose. That was the nature of their bond now. Not routine, not dependence, but choice. And choice was the purest form of love. Michael Reed, the veterinarian who had once failed to save a life, had learned the greatest lesson nature could teach. Sometimes saving a life means letting it go. Sometimes love requires loss. And sometimes, if you are very lucky, what you release comes back to you, not because it must, but because it wants to. And that makes all the difference.